I have Sumayah Khan. She's the chairperson for United for Palestine, an activist, education activist, unionist, and educator. She does a program called School Matters on Tuesday, and she's been actively involved in the fight against oppression throughout the world, but indeed currently in Gaza, and she's kept a close eye in the last 2 years on the happenings in Gaza. So I'd like to welcome Sumayah Khan. Sumayah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus Live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you to having me once again in News in Focus.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you because obviously you're playing a significant role in United for Palestine, being the chairperson. And I know in a lot of protest marches you've been quite active, and also you keeping in mind that oppression is a no-no, not only here in South Africa, throughout the world, but also from a religious perspective. So I want you to explain to our listeners, as an educator, as a civic activist, being involved with unionization, fighting for the rights of workers, that now you got into an arena where you into international politics and fighting the cause of Gaza and realizing there's a role to play. What prompted you to get into an interest in the situation in Palestine? Because obviously there's been a history, and with the struggle credentials that many of us had pre-apartheid, that naturally links you up to fight oppression throughout the world whenever you hear about it and become an activist. So can you just explain to our listeners, number one, you become the chair lady of United for Palestine, but you also got an active interest in Gaza, and whenever there's a need for UFP or other organizations to get involved in activism, whether it's protest marches, whether it's going to the comrades and talking against the Israeli runners, or attending meetings where some kind of decision is to be taken. How do we deal with this Palestinian? How do we get humanitarian aid? So if you can just run through and give our listeners a bit of an insight.
Yeah. Do you asked a very interesting question, because when I wasn't an activist and when I wasn't involved in civic responsibilities, other organizations, being someone who's so involved in the union, I would always wonder, what are these people going on about? They look so barbaric, protesting, and what are they doing? But then again, we were not educated what they were doing, what was their purpose, and what was their cause. And I think, for someone who sees everything black and white, you always want to do the right thing. We all are not perfect, but we always want to do what is right. And also being someone who grew up, I would say, I think I was like younger a little bit, during the apartheid era. I'll recall once we were at Addington Beach. Mm-hmm. So I have two other siblings, and they look, as you know, my grandfather were not from South Africa. They're from Afghanistan. They're Pathans. They came here during the Anglo-Boer War. How's that for you? They came here during the Anglo-Boer War as soldiers. Being a Pathan, being a warrior, standing up. I think it's like embedded in our DNA. And I remember swimming and playing in, paddling pool. And my mom and my dad said, okay, so if the police come, you act like you can't find your parents. And they did not go to my brother and my sister, because in the water, generally, Pathan people, you don't know whether they're Malay, whether they're colored, whether they're white or something. And they passed more for being colored. And me with my jet black hair, they came up to me and I said I couldn't find. And I found it so strange, because that whole harsh mentality. So that did affect me in a way, thinking why I can't swim here with all these other children. And then you saw other races. You saw black kids, further away from me. And I think that was the very first time when it hit you. Okay, we all live together in South Africa, but we all are not given the same things. And as you grow, from primary to secondary and to high school, you discover that's apartheid. That's apartheid. We, all of us, are not treated the same. And sometimes the justification why different races are treated differently doesn't make sense. And when you think about it, when you're younger, it's amazing. When you're a child, you tend to question that why doesn't stop. It continues. And me coming from a school in the area, Overport Secondary, for those who know, it was one of the first schools during apartheid which had learners who were Black African learners, because a lot of the educators from that school was SATU leadership, South African Democratic Teachers Union. So there we are during apartheid time, early high school. We have Black learners, colored learners. I mean, obviously majority Indian because it is an Indian area. So we grew up with other race groups, but the other schools did not have them. But Overport Secondary had them because the leadership were people who were very active, and they came from Salisbury Island. When you think about it, they were activists. So due to department and being so active, involved with the union, Overport Secondary was one of the very few schools in an Indian community who had children who did not live around. Because then it was, if you lived around the school, you have to go to that school. You cannot go to the neighboring school of a different race, whatever. And again, you grow, you read material, you listen to your family, your neighbors, your friends, you watch television, and that tends to grow who you are. And amazingly, sometimes us being Muslim, you realize as you go into madrasa school that everyone is the same. And the reason why we perform Hajj or we go for Umrah, we all wear the ihram, the same, to tell us that we all are the same. But then you ask, but we're not treated the same. We do different things. And I went to University of Durban Westville, UDW, overwhelming in the beginning because, as you know, UDW has a history of a university where the learners have always been, regardless of which era they were, they've always been very involved in activism. And I remember my very first year there was a massive protest where they wanted learners of different color to come in. And it was a lot of Indian lecturers, Sash Cooper, Judge Zakaria, the blind judge, and many others who were so involved. And this kind of scared me. It intrigued me at the same time. And then you realize, okay, I'm a female, a Muslim female. We must behave a certain way, act a certain way. But you're curious. You want to know what's happening on. And I mean, So, and then I got involved at university. And then during when I started my teaching career, afterwards when I joined the government, you get exposed to different unions and you discovered that, as you know, I held positions in SATU, South African Democratic Teachers Union. And that's how I got involved and I started. But there's something which everyone has in common, whether you are a human rights activist, whether you are an animal activist, whether you are any activist belonging to anything, we all have one thing in common, and that is for justice, humanity, and everything should be equal, democratic, And in the underlining and behind the scenes, we are outcome of apartheid. And this is what a lot of our youth do not understand currently. They tend to complain that we're struggling, things are hard, things are tough, but they really don't know what is it to struggle, to be there. When you think about your parents, your grandparents, what they went. Our tech is sitting here. If you probably think about it, parents, grandparents carried a dompas back in the day. And, you had to be home at a different time. And so that all of us united everyone to become an activist. And in my journey, I would say, as you know, then I became an education activist, knowing that the education curriculum kept on changing. We had OBE, RNCS, we have CAPS now. So it kept on changing to accommodate everyone. And you asked the question, how did I get involved with Palestine and Gaza? Well, throughout our life, we know have always been civil wars and wars with the neighboring countries around there. But this last, I think, 2 or 3 years is knowing that there's a place on the world, on the globe, where nobody cares and nobody worries. Is it political? what is it, a genocide? What is it? And some of us have this fear where we do not want to get involved because there's nothing we can do. We end up just talking political jargon on our phones. We when we meet friends and families, we want to show how much more we know of what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Iraq, what's happening in Saudi, UAE. But what are we doing to make a change? And then I know your guest, I mentioned this. I've met at one of our marches, I bumped into other activists from the community and around the area. And then you discover you have other leaders like Brother Abdul Velodia, who's been involved in UFP, United for Palestine, for almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. And he tended to kind of unite people who have the same vision, the same mission, the same cause, the same outcome and the same goal. Let's unite and take and move this forward. And when you think about it, not only in a community of Overport or KZN, but when you think about it nationally, South Africa, this happened in every other community, every other province. And this is how it was possible for us to be the mover for ICJ. Look at how just one activist uniting everybody together. And then you realize I'm not the only one. I'm not afraid to go on that street, scream out and say, free, free Palestine, because there's everybody else. There's a whole lot of other activists and protesters.
Tell me, Sumayah, from an Islamic perspective, obviously being a Muslim woman, and realizing that I got to look back and say, what does the religion demand of me as an individual? Perhaps you can just give us some insight into...
When you look at that, well, 2015, I had National Union do an article on me. And there was a lady, it was, with the union, we are normally... same as the ruling party, where we re-elect members, sites, regional leaders, provincial leaders. It was a Friday Jummah. I was wearing a teal trilobal cloak and I had a scarf on. And we had to go to a very popular school with staff close to 70. And we had to re-elect members. And this school was mixed race. Now, there you see this Muslim lady. I was very younger then. What is she coming here? How is she going to do these elections? What is her mandate? And by the way, she's a Muslim, so obviously she's weak. And there was another lady, Namusa. She's actually the national spokesperson for South African Democratic Teachers Union. She was sitting there because she needed to find out what's going, because there were political issues and challenges and racial challenges at the school. And there, our leadership introduced me and I started speaking. And I was young. I was still learning from other leaders. And she was like kind of shocked because she already stereotyped that all Muslim women sit at home, they cook, they clean, and they worship their husbands. And that's what she told me. And you're wearing a scarf and a cloak, and wow, you stood up, you spoke, you used South African apartheid terminologies, and everyone listened to you, and everyone addressed you as a leader. And she started writing an article of me, and in that article, she wrote there that when you think about people holding political positions, people holding leadership positions, people standing for justice, humanity, for things to be democratic, you'll never, ever find a Muslim young woman to be involved. And meeting me, that kind of, set the standards, okay, that's different. And when she chatted, I was on the bottom rung. I was I was branch at that moment. And she mentioned that after she had met me without introducing herself, her whole mindset has shifted how she sees a South African Muslim woman. And while chatting to me, I told her, my name, when I was quite little, lots of people meet me and they'll ask me, what's your name? I'll say, my name is Sumayah. And I know they'll tell me, oh, your name is named after the first Muslim woman to be martyred in Islam, who stood up for the correct. And I told her that story and we started chatting. And then you realize, hey, you know what, guys, let's step back and tell ourselves we're Muslim. Our religion, Islam, teaches us to be involved. If you look at all the prophets, especially a Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, and his wives, how active were they? How much have they done? Not only in spreading Islam, but also when it came to communities, when it came to people protesting against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, and every other negative thing which has happened then. They have safeguarded, they have traveled, they have protested, they have, just like how when you look at it, we had people who were standing for the truth during apartheid time, who hid in houses, who ran away, who no one knew where they were, just to come out of that terrible situation. Same did all the Prophet ﷺ's wife and all the women in Islam who held leadership positions. And it is so important for us as Muslim women to create the future, because we are mothers. How important are mothers? Let's be realistic. Regardless whether you're a teacher, doctor, lawyer, whoever, a woman still runs a household. You still got to go home. You still got to cook. You still got to clean. You still got to see to your family, your husband, your children. You still see to the upliftment of that, to the morals, to the values, obviously with the assistance of your spouse. But again, Muslim women play such an important role in the ummah. It starts from your home to your neighbor, to your street, out into the streets and into the nation, because we can make change, because it starts at the lap, as they say, on your lap, just being a woman.
Okay, I think Sumayah has just given us a background why she conscientized herself to get involved in the struggle to free Palestine, and she equated, the Muslim women of the time of the Sahaba Ikram, the wives of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when there were battles that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had to get the men folk to attend to, the Battle of Badr, the Battle of Yarmouk, to defend Islam. The women folk used to prepare their husbands, the Sahaba Ikram, to go and battle. And those men that didn't go, they were like kind of classed as sissies, because they knew the importance of martyrdom as well as the women folk that prepared the men folk.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break, and inshallah after the break we're going to actually give an update on the situation in Gaza, how that particular genocide is being deflected because the Iran-Israel war has come in between, and there are some serious implications in that war. So we'll unpack that inshallah after the short break.
We'd love to meet you.
Pay us a visit. Radio Al Ansar.
It's celebration time at Simplex Radio. We're turning 66, and we're doing it in style with the grand opening of our newly extended showroom. Get ready for exciting discounts off a selected range of the biggest brands in home appliances, car radios, TVs, and home theater systems. But only for 10 days. Let our expert team help you create the home of your dreams. Open Sunday, June 29th. Don't miss out. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust. T's and C's apply.
Hey South Africa, get ready for a powerful night of insight and inspiration as Adventure proudly presents the Sami Hamdi South African Tour. Ummah in Motion, the journey to collective strength. You've seen him on digital platforms, now experience him live on stage. Durban, 27th June at NMJ Islamic Center. Cape Town, 28th June at the CTICC. And Johannesburg, 29th June at Kurtuba Convention Center. Don't miss this chance to hear one of the world's most dynamic political analysts up close and personal. Seats are limited. Book now and Quicket and be part of the conversation that matters. The Ummah is in motion. Are you?
Explore the world with Worldview Travel. Let our expert team guide you in creating a travel experience that exceeds your expectations. Unbeatable flight deals, corporate and leisure bookings, luxurious accommodations, tailor-made packages, reliable car rentals, comprehensive travel insurance, seamless visa assistance. Visit us at 55 Problem Keys Road, Durban. Call 031-001-7062 or 0718350216. Follow us on Instagram at Worldview Travel. Worldview Travel creates memories to last a lifetime.
Ladies, you've been waiting for this Sip and Paint event. Join us for a creative afternoon of sipping and painting. Saturday, July 19th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. 207 West Road, Conference Hall.
Unleash your inner artist, relax and enjoy good company. All materials provided for just 300 Rand.
Let's get creative and make some unforgettable memories. Call Hajra now on 075-082-4327.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto. Your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Kenfield Auto.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار.
I won't start.
Kenfield Auto.
Noisy brakes.
Kenfield Auto.
Due for a service.
Kenfield Auto. Kenfield Auto, the answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto.
اللهم إنك ترى ما نزل بنا في غزة من الأحوال يا ذا الجلال والعزة يا ذا الجبروت والعزة. اللهم أعز أهل غزة، اللهم فرج عن أهل غزة، اللهم فرح أهل غزة، اللهم انصر أهل غزة، اللهم داو جريحهم، اللهم اشف مريضهم، اللهم اقبل شهيدهم، اللهم ارحم ميتهم، اللهم كفف جراحاتهم وبرد آلامهم، اللهم واجعل لهم وللمسلمين فرجا قريبا يا الله. اللهم فرج عنا وعن المسلمين في كل مكان. اللهم انصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين واخذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداء الدين يا رب العالمين. سبحانك سبحانك ترى الظالمين فتمهلهم حتى يظنوا أنك تهملهم وتبتلي الصالحين في الدنيا حتى يستيئسوا فإن استيئسوا أتيتهم بنصرهم. اللهم إنك تعلم أن جراحات المسلمين كثيرة وآلامهم كثيرة في كل مكان وفي كل زمان. اللهم فانصرنا على أعدائنا يا الله. اللهم فثبت أقدامنا يا الله.
Radio Al-Ansar, Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg 105.6 FM.
Ya Rasulallah, Ya Habiballah, Aka, 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 Aka. پھر کے گلی گلی تباہ ہو کر صبر کی کھائے کیوں دل کو جو عقل دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں رخصت قافلہ کشان غش سے ہمیں اٹھائے کیوں رخصت سے قافلہ کشان غش سے ہمیں اٹھائے کیوں سوتے ہیں ان کے سائے میں سوتے ہیں ان کے سائے میں کوئی ہمیں جگائے کیوں پھر کے دل کو جو عقل دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں یاد حضور کی قسم غفلت عیش ہے ستم یاد حضور کی قسم غفلت عیش ہے ستم خوب ہے قید غم میں ہم خوب ہے قید غم میں ہم کوئی ہمیں چھڑائے کیوں وہ جو نہ تھے تو کچھ نہ تھا وہ جو نہ ہو تو کچھ نہ ہو وہ جو نہ تھے تو کچھ نہ تھا وہ جو نہ ہو تو کچھ نہ ہو جان ہے وہ جہان کی جان ہے وہ جہان کی جان ہے تو جہان ہے آقا کی کھائے کیوں دل کو جو عقل دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں ہاں جان ہے عشق مصطفیٰ روز فزوں کرے خدا جان ہے عشق مصطفیٰ روز فزوں کرے خدا جس کو درد کا مزہ جس کو درد کا مزہ سانسے دوا اٹھائے کیوں پھر کے کیوں دل کو جو عقل دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں ہے تو رضا نرا ستم جرم پہ گئے لجائے ہم ہے تو رضا نرا ستم جرم پہ گئے لجائے ہم کوئی بجائے سو سے غم کوئی بجائے سو سے غم سازے طرب بجائے کیوں
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. A beautiful nasheed expressing the outstanding qualities of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. is reported by ulama ikram and in the Quran, indeed, the world would not have been created had it not been for Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. And we know that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam fought many illustrious battles, and he taught the ummah how to undertake, battles. Sahaba ikram learned a lot from him. And the crux of his management of battles was that take the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. Don't forego your ibadat in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why they were successful in many a battle. He was a classic example of an outstanding human being. And if we emulate his sunnats, we definitely will be on the right path. Before the break, we're chatting to Sumayah, who gave us some background on what type of activism leads you into understanding the importance of getting involved in fighting oppression, and in particular, a classic example of serious oppression is the genocide that's taking place in Palestine, particularly in Gaza, more so in the last 18 months. And we know the Nakba has been taking place from the 1940s. So the battle for liberation of Palestine has been an ongoing subject worldwide. And even our former president, our first black president in South Africa, Nelson Mandela, clearly said that South Africa will not be free until Palestine is free. And we know our ulama ikram always tell us, look at the situation in Palestine and compare ourselves with that in South Africa. Even the pre-apartheid era, it was nowhere near the atrocities that the people are going through in Palestine. And Sumayah, amazingly, you mentioned about the outstanding qualities of the women at the time of the Sahaba Ikram and how they sacrifice. So perhaps, you can just give us an update. I know we got about 10 minutes left, and you're going to interview the chairperson of SAMNET, Dr. Faisal Suleiman, who's quite au fait with the situation, and he's going to give us his impression of the situation in Palestine vis-a-vis what's happening in the Iran-Israel war. But the current situation in Palestine and the difficulties our people are going through, the lives that are being lost. Perhaps you just want to give us an impression of that, and the genocide is continuing while the Israel-Iran war was taking place.
When you think about it, how many of us have kind of forgotten a little bit of Gaza with Iran and the USA, and we tending to follow that news. But the question is, have everything shifted from Gaza? Because we're following Iran, the USA, what's going on, Israel. But we have forgotten, is it, one will think, is it orchestrated politically for us to forget about Gaza? And, when you do your research into many political analysis, they tell you, we're forgetting about Gaza. Imagine us, before I talk about the situation currently, us with no lights and water during load shedding. Load shedding, how many households are gone crazy? We can't wait. We end up fighting, arguing. We just can't function with technology, without technology not being there. No water shortages. Taps are closed, pipes are burst. No one is fixing that burst sewer down our street, and we are going crazy. We are looking for places to shift. What can we do? But then, when you sit down and think, you make shukr for what you have, because the situation in Gaza is, something else. It is basically a man-made drought, a man-made famine, a man-made disaster, a man-made who is contributing to everything that which a human being cannot live, cannot exist. Right now, when you think about it, 38% of healthcare services are partially working. Most of them are not even non-existent. And 84% facilities are damaged. Infrastructure is totally destroyed. There's no access. And that is something what we need, because generally if there's an accident, if there's an airstrike, if there's something, an explosion, immediately we want to take the person to the hospital. But unfortunately, it doesn't exist, And we spoke about water consumption. Well, water is practically undrinkable. And when you think about it, there's sewage in the water, there's stagnant water. There is a water shortage. I wouldn't say shortage. Basically, water is hardly existent. It doesn't exist, you know. And when you think about the shelters, they are bursting. They are overcrowded. A shelter which accommodates just say 100, probably got 400 or 380. Now, imagine when we look at our kennel, our dog's kennel, with those pups, we feel it's overcrowded. Now, imagine how many of people, the living conditions are terrible. Our poor brothers and sisters are just existing, you know, every day as it comes in Gaza. And we spoke about the massive, you know, infrastructure damage and dire humanitarian collapse. When you think about it, there's nothing. You know, on my previous show, which I did, the Global March to Gaza, I had Dr. Siam's wife, Aisha Siam. She told us a story that happened the day before she came on that show. I think it was on Monday evening. Her nephew went to get food, almost died, risked his life, and almost more than half a day later, he comes home alive, but exhausted and, you know, really, really tired. And you know, his family was just so glad to see him. And when he opens that box, which I think the UN gives, the agencies don't even want to go out, you know. Every single thing in that box, the flour, all was rotten. But she told me they still cooked it, they still ate it, because they have nothing else. How are they going to survive? And I think, you know, we as Muslims, as human beings, we tend to take so much for granted. You know, those who are listening to us, just sit back and think how many times we cook food and the leftovers in the pot, or the rice stuck in the burnt rice or whatever. What do? We throw it away. But that is food. But what our brothers and sisters have is not even food. You know, you see videos, reels of children or even of adults, women, boiling and cooking grass. And now there's not even grass left anymore. You know, there's nothing there. And the aid flow is so limited. Agencies, again, do not want to go. And it's human nature. One tends to fear their life. You know, are we going to come back home to our families? And environmental contamination on the ground is the worst. You know, and I think when we think about it, was it last year, families still sat there on their home, in that flat, in that apartment with the walls all damaged. But with the table, they decorated it, and they did the iftars, the series, and the Eid, if you recall. And that was overwhelming, but they still had some kind of structures. Now there's nothing. And it's absolutely devastating. It's inhumane. Sometimes you sit and you think, why is no one helping? And, you know, when you talk to people who are so, you know, at these protests we go for, at these marches, we have brothers and sisters who are so overwhelmed. They start crying when they are thinking of the brothers and sisters in Gaza, our babies. You know, we're not talking about those who have passed on, those who have died, but the ones who are still existing, where you just see skeletons. You see a child who the whole families are wiped out. You see a mother, a granny who lost all her children, all her grandchildren, her spouse, and it's just her alone. But you don't even know where they get this strength, courage, faith, hope to still be so passionate in salah, in prayer, in hope, and, you know, being so grateful. And when you see them being interviewed, how many of them start off the conversation? If you ask us, how is our day? We start complaining, and then we'll start talking, or we'll complain about something. But they start off saying, Alhamdulillah. That faith is ever so great. And that is something, you know, we worry that they're suffering, and they look at us, no, we are suffering because we have lost our faith, but they haven't.
You know, the resilience that you're talking about shown by those that are living in abject poverty in Gaza with everything lost.
Poverty is putting it mild. You're still getting some scraps, but this is like a famine.
And the circumstances under which they're surviving is all that they have, that we're looking forward to the akhirat, because those that died as martyrs are in the higher stages in Jannah. And those that passed away, those that they left behind are saying, we look forward to meeting them in the high state in Jannah. Like the Sahaba Ikram, their wives were telling them that you got an opportunity to get martyred to be in high stage in Jannah during the battles.
Yeah.
They are facing that in Palestine. And from an Islamic perspective, I know we're into our news break now, and we're going to, explore that a little bit further. I know you have a guest, Dr. Faisal Suleiman, which you'll chat after the news break, to find out what can we as Muslims do. And, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam is reported to have said that when we see oppression, when we know there's injustices taking place, is one of the things we can do, depending on the level of our iman, to what level are in the recommendations made by Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. And there's an ayat in the Quran that talks about a pain in the body. If you feel a pain in the body, the entire body is uncomfortable, whether it's a cardiac problem, whether it's a pulmonary problem, whether it's a problem with your, legs or your knees. The whole body feels uncomfortable, and you feel the pain throughout the body, and you've got to deal with that particular problem. So inshallah, we'll unpack how do we deal with the situation in Gaza, and what are the implications of the Iran-Israel war relative to Gaza, because billions of dollars have been spent in missiles that have been blasted on all sides. Iran blasting so many missiles in Israel. Couldn't that have been used to provide aid and actually deal with Israel in allowing the humanitarian aid to go into Gaza? So inshallah, after the news break, we'll explore those issues and have a chat about it. Before the news break, she mentioned that billions of dollars were spent firing missiles between Israel and Iran. And on the one side, people in Gaza, the genocide is continuing and more lives are lost. Atrocities are taking place. And how do we react to this? Sumayah, can you go ahead?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Dr. Faisal Suleiman, how are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam, Sumayah. Alhamdulillah, thank you and so much for having us.
Jazakallah for linking up with us this evening. From your analysis, as you're aware, when we're looking into global tension, the current situation involving Gaza, Palestine, Iran, and the USA, and the broader regional instability, is significantly impacting global politics and contributing to the rising global tension, in multiple ways. When we look at the Israel war, Iran's role, Western nations, versus Africa, United Nation paralysis, mass movements, the social divisions, legal implications, and tensions in human rights institutions, even the Red Sea crisis, if one tends to look at it, oil prices, the list just goes on and on. So what would you say is currently going on with global tension, with all that's going on with Gaza, with Iran, with the USA?
Sumayah, I suppose it depends on how far back we want to go, but we can start right at the Crusades, and to many people, the Crusades is still carrying on, just in a different form and called different names. So you have the Crusades, and then the imperialists from the Western colonial powers, the 4 or 5 that colonized Africa, South America, and the Middle East. The agreements post-World War II that carved up a lot of the Middle East, created what today we refer to as the nation states. There was no nation state. And then you look at the map, you can see someone took a pen and, drew the rectangles, etc., into especially Northern Africa and the Middle East. Then it goes to the purpose that Israel served. The first myth is that, the posting of the post-Nazi Holocaust, that Jews needed a refuge. That was, in fact, Norman Finkelstein and others have written very Jewish people themselves, children of Holocaust survivors, about manufacturing consent and how the Zionist movement even worked with the Nazis. How the Zionist movement even bombed their own people in Iraq, Jews, and other places, and drove fear into them, under false flag operations to drive them to Israel, and this concept of a homeland for the Jews. And it served a dual purpose. One of the, obviously, it's obvious, but it's still important to remind people, is that the world, notwithstanding solar and wind energy and renewable energies, still 80% of the world runs on oil. And cheap oil, there's oil in Siberia, there's oil in Antarctica, in the Arctic, in Greenland, but the cost of producing it is like 3 and 4 times of what it is to produce or to get it out of the earth in the Middle East. So, and of course now, like Qatar, places like Qatar with LPG, gas, etc. But so geostrategically, you needed an external force in the middle of all of these Arab countries. The Ottoman Empire, as we know, was dismantled. And now you had this foreign presence backed by the West to ensure that you do not get another Muslim unity. And then secondly, it's a source of having to control the Middle East because of the fact that the oil is still largely needed by the world and at a cheap price. And the person who controls oil has a huge say in the world economy. And the petrodollar, as people know, Kissinger's greatest miracle was convincing the Saudis to trade oil only in dollars and to virtually fix their currency to the dollar. So depending, like I said, how far back you go and you bring that forward, Middle East is strategic to or control of the Middle East is strategic to the West from an economic perspective, from the continuation of the Crusades, ensuring that Islam never raises its head again and is not a unified caliphate or an ummah. It's just as important to fundamentalist Christians and that. And finally, the concept that, in the Christian concept, that the Antichrist will only come when Jews control that whole area. And this is the Christian Zionism angle. And so the religious use or justification for what you spoke about, and that is the absolute massacring and genocide, not only of Gaza, but since 1948, since the creation of Israel. So all of that combined leaves us with this area that is strategic to China, to Russia, and of course to the whole of the West, represented by the United States in the main. And therefore, it can never be allowed to to govern itself, govern by the will of the people, govern according to Islamic Sharia or what is good for Muslims or the country. And therefore, you'll always have this. I mean, the ceasefire is not a ceasefire. It is just a pause for Israel to rearm, regroup, reorganize itself. Israel was in the ascendancy and they didn't have the supersonic ballistic missiles hitting them. You can be sure there'd be no ceasefire. Fortunately, somewhere along the line, the Americans had for now. And I think we must never forget this. Whether it is Trump or the next president of the United States, they come and go. It's like, if I use the simple example, the ministers in our country may come and go, but the DGs, the DGGs, the whole organization of departments are still there, and their agendas more or less still go. And, what goes on under the scene, even if a minister may say one thing, but the DGs and the DGGs, etc., run the departments. And the same thing here, the hawks, the neocons, whatever you want to call them, in the State Department, in the defense, in the all of the strategic spy agencies, etc., NSA, CIA, all of them are still there, notwithstanding who comes into the White House. And therefore, the greater plan for the greater Israel, the dominance of the West over the Middle East is going to continue. And therefore, at no stage should we be happy to say, okay, maybe Trump has seen the light, or the next president or whatever, or even Netanyahu, when this is over, goes to jail as he should. internally or internationally, the next next Zionist prime minister or any of the cabinet is going to be any better. They're just going to wanting to do the same using different methods. So I think that is core to remembering where we are and where the future holds.
Yeah.
And as far as proxy wars go, it's highly complicated at the moment. Clearly, we all know that literally the West is in a proxy war with Russia to weaken Russia. If you can weaken Russia, the next step is China. But there's a huge proxy war going on, and the Ukrainians are paying the price for it. And at the moment, what one didn't want to see is Iran turned into a proxy war for Russia and America, where Russia, increases its supply of weapons, and the test ground becomes Iran.
Yeah.
And the final one, what is going on now has proven one thing. Then, as much as, and I personally, and I think Islamically, nuclear weapons should not be allowed anywhere because of the very nature of their indiscriminate mass and long-lasting devastation and effects, as we all know from what saw happen in Japan, depleted uranium in Iraq. That it seems now your only protection from having round 2 and 3 of what is happening now is going to be nuclear weapons. I imagine North Korea would have been invaded, destabilized, etc. a long time ago had it not had nuclear weapons. And I think this is now driving the world to say your only safeguard is going to be wanting to get nuclear weapons. So there's that fear that, like the Kim Jong-il fear that you can't attack this man. There's a madman who may he's got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's one of the reasons maybe Iran hasn't founded Israel even more, because the threat of using that, notwithstanding that I think the other countries in the world wouldn't have allowed it, desperate people, and Netanyahu is as bad as they come, had the potential to use a low-grade nuclear weapon in Iranian oil fields or something like that.
Yeah. Western nations versus global South, that's looking at Africa. The US and some European allies continue to back Israel, and diplomatically and military, leading to severe criticism from many countries in global South, as in Africa, including South Africa, and Indonesia. How South Africa's stance on Gaza affects it globally and nationally?
Look, nationally, make no mistake, the government and President Ramaphosa are under severe pressure. Internally, from the Zionist business community, from the Jewish board, the Zionist Federation, Friends of Israel, and a whole host of others. Internationally, you can be sure the CIA or the embassies via their, intelligence officers, etc., cultural officers, whatever you want to call them, are sitting at DERCO, at our state security apparatus. One talking about ISIS in South Africa, Al Qaeda. I remember there was all of those things, Al Qaeda camps in South Africa around the World Cup time, etc., etc. To convince our government to fall in line with the sort of foreign policy that the West would like us to have. South Africa has treaded very carefully, partly because being a member of BRICS, one of the founding members, having our huge trading partner with the United States. And access to our market, had to tread this very carefully, notwithstanding, and here, no matter what the other failings of the ANC may be, and there are many, as far as foreign affairs, as far as our policies have been concerned, they have been superb. Clearly, they could have been better. Even now, it would be great to see all exports of coal to Israel stop, the closure of the Israeli embassy, etc., etc. But given, geopolitics and the sort of economic power that the Jewish lobby in South Africa holds, and how beholden many of the political parties are to this lobby, even going to the ICJ as the only country in the world to do that, and to speak out at the United Nations, the regular, statements from DERCO, Ronald Lamola, our president, condemning Israel, are not easy to make in the sort of global world that we live in. and yet, we see our country as one of the foremost countries speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
So it will affect. Make no mistake, Sumayah, even now, whether it's anyone who wants to see some of this, just look at the podcast called Biz News, which is like the DA Jewish mouthpiece, business under the guise of business. Rob Hershoff's statements, his podcasts, etc. You will see they are openly plotting. They're not even hiding it. The downfall of the ANC because of the support for the ICJ case, etc. And then of course we know even AGOA was put on the table. Ibrahim Rasool's expulsion. No matter what else they say, had in no small way been due to the fact that we went to the ICJ, etc.
Yeah. As a human rights activist, as chair of South African Muslim Network, SAMNet, what advice do you have, especially for our Muslim brothers and sisters, concerning that's happening in Gaza and globally, with the genocide?
The first thing I think we need to get over, and it's going on for decades now, is bemoaning ourselves for the hypocrisy of the West. I look at social media chats, social functions, etc., and people are, see how hypocrite the United States. What about Israel doing this? What about, look at even Australia. They just, at the moment, only Israel has the right to defend itself. Iran would never have a nuclear weapon, etc. And we're doing this now for 50 and 60 and 80 years. We must get over that. Stop wasting time and energy ever thinking that these people are ever going to be on our side or ever do what is right and do what is just. We're not going to. So we should stop wasting time and energy on that. Divert the time and energy and money towards how we fight that, how we tackle that. And so Sumayah, it starts at, you ask, what can we do? The first thing is to start in our homes. I am amazed. I spoke to some young people this weekend and who didn't know the extent of the support. And these were people from the Tabligh Jamaat who are huge supporters of this K-Way brand that comes out of Cape Union Mart, whose owner, Kravitz, has won numerous awards from Israel for the amount of money he gives them and the support he gives them.
Yeah.
Was unaware that, that K-Way is such a big supporter of Israel. And this was a young man, mid-20s, who has a phone, who's into social media and all of this. So I think the first place to start has to be in our homes. Has to be the change of conversations away from some of the soccer and motor racing. And I'm not saying you don't speak about that at all, but it has to be on our dinner table where we start to educate ourselves and speak about this. That's in the home. And clearly money and du'as are taken for granted. That those are step 1, 2, and 3 always.
Yeah.
The next step then, that's the home. Then it has to be conversations when you are going out. But up the level of conversation to what else we can. Then the third one, Sumayah, is boycotting. And we are clearly, as an Islamic Medical Association, which I also had, Tiva is an Israeli-owned medical company. Clover is an Israeli-owned dairy company. Cape Union Mart. So, some will go to the extent of including Coke, some will say no Coke. But the others, there's no doubt about this scam. This scam is an open, the CEO is an open, not just supporter of Zionism, but who belittles Muslims and Islam. Right? So those are easy ones. Zara. I still see lots of women, walking past in a shopping mall, Muslims, especially wearing hijab and niqab, entering Zara. And, so those are, at the moment, I'm sure people, hopefully people know that Cape Union Mart is taking the Palestine Solidarity Committee to court over its boycott actions. If it wasn't hurting, why would they do this? They try to dismiss it, it's business as usual and we have our sale on and everything. If it wasn't hurting, why would they want to take you to court to stop it? Similarly, Israel spends billions and billions of dollars on marketing, on hiring people just to sit on social media and create what their propaganda arm, Hezbollah, lies, deceit, etc. Because public relations and image and boycotts and divestment works, it hurts. We know it from our time in South Africa. It wasn't lumped mines planted in a few police stations that brought the nationalist government to its knees. Yeah. It was that BDS, the isolation, the sanctions, the divestment that made the Nats realize this is unsustainable.
Yeah.
We have to talk and find a peaceful solution. So boycott is the next one. The next one is money. And I'm not talking only about relief. I'm talking about all of the work. One of the problems we have, Sumayah, is everyone that's involved in Palestine work virtually has 2 other day jobs, belong to another organization, does this part-time.
Yeah.
Designers don't do things part-time. They put in money together and they pay specialists, pay legal specialists, pay media specialists, pay journalists to do this work. And this is now where we're saying as SEMNET, etc., 5% of your charity spend must be given. At the moment, I'm not saying necessarily to SEMNET, but we want to only organizations doing it. But there's a limit to how much we can volunteer and how much we need to say, pay specialists to do this full time. Even it applies to Kashmir, working for the Kashmiri cause. It has to be done full time and people pay to do that.
Exactly.
So that's the next one.
Yeah.
And those are not difficult to do.
Yeah. Dr. Faisal Suleiman,
yeah.
so sorry to cut you off there, but inshallah, we need to do a whole show on that Kashmir issue. Jazakallah once again for linking up and imparting your knowledge and your wisdom, because lots of people do not know about Cape Union Mart. They never knew what it was all about. But now you have given them clarity on that. Jazakallah once again for linking up this evening in Youth in Focus.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Shukran, Sumayah, for some very important questions you raised with Faisal. He's quite knowledgeable in the situation, and Faisal can go on in a lengthy interview. We had him here, and I think you realized that he probably could have taken the balance of the show, so you cut him off. But I think sort of some very, very important issues that he pointed out, and obviously you raised that before the interview. And I know you've got another appointment and you need to leave the studio, but I want to thank you for joining us in News in Focus and sharing this platform with me, especially sharing your vast knowledge on the Gazan situation. As the chairperson of United for Palestine, and you have your Secretary General that just joined us all the way. He's come from Cape Town, and he's going to wear his political hat and chat with us briefly on the local government service delivery summit that took place in a report back. But I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to give us your closing comments. I know you've got some advice you want to give to our listeners.
You have the best guest in the house. We have our honorable brother Imran Subrati. We have our political analysis, Hassan Mutala. And you know what? They're definitely going to impart the best knowledge. But my message just to the common man out there, oppression is just not the act of harming others. It is also the silence in the face of injustice. Islam, as we discussed, Islam teaches us to stand with the oppressed, speak the truth for power, and never support zulm in any form. Simple English, that's about it. From me, Sumayah Khan. Jazakallah once again for having me in News in Focus. Assalamu alaikum.
Shukran, Sumayah, and you really imparted some very important knowledge, shows the amount of information you've sought and the kind of action you and your committee has taken. We certainly will have you back soon in News in Focus to impart more. And we know we wanted to touch more about the Israel-Iran conflict and the various stories that are coming through. Is this a conflict of convenience? Faisal indicated that Israel were on the back foot, America was on the back foot, and they all have to be careful, particularly on the nuclear side. But we know you're going to go and do your household chores still, and you sacrifice all the time.
A Muslim woman.
Yes. So go home and finish the rest. Inshallah, let me continue with News in Focus for the rest.